Negative painting is a technique that typically leaves the foreground objects lighter than those in the background. It can be used to create some surprising, visually striking images. We're going to break down the technique into easy steps, building on some of the skills you have already developed in the rest of the series. If you're jumping in here, that's awesome. Have at it. If you've been following the course from the beginning, then you're halfway through. Congratulations! The first 3 lessons in the course have been fairly easy, so you'll notice quite a jump in difficulty with this one and the following 2. This tutorial in particular will take quite a long time to complete. Be patient, follow the steps carefully and methodically, and you'll see fantastic results. I recommend you have a quick scrub through the video before starting, just to get an idea of the whole process. You don't need a practice session for this tutorial, so let's get painting. Get your Chromatek tutorial pad and find this template, or grab the template from the link in the description below and print it on your own watercolor paper. Tape it to a board, and stretch it if you like. If you want to know how to do that, then check the link in the description. We're going to start by doing a blue and yellow wash over the whole picture. Mix up a bit of mid-yellow and cobalt blue. Start by covering the entire picture in a thin wash of clean water. Then paint in some random blue and yellow areas. Let the paint bleed and blend together. Once we've filled in the rest of the painting, this will give the lightest areas a bit of texture. Now let the whole thing dry, or whack that hairdryer on it if you just can't wait to get painting. As with most watercolor painting, we're going to work from light to dark here. I wanted this to have a muted brown and yellow palette, kind of a 70s thing, I guess. But if that's not your vibe, then use whatever colors you want. The principle will remain exactly the same. Here's the colors I'm going to use. For each layer that we paint, we're going to be using 2 contrasting tones. We're starting with the yellow ochre color, so you're going to want to mix up plenty of paint in both a light and a dark shade for this. Here's the lighter shade. I really recommend testing the colors on a spare sheet of paper to make sure you're happy with them before applying them to the painting. And now I'm mixing the darker one. We're going to start by painting these areas, everything except for the main tree. I'm going to use a sheet of paper to protect the rest of the painting as I go. It's up to you whether or not you do that. It's not essential. Begin by painting this first area using a flat wash technique. You know how to do the flat wash, right? If not, then you definitely want to check out the first video in this series and get up to speed. It's vital that you use enough paint to keep the surface wet because of what comes next. Dry off your brush, and using the darker shade, paint around the edge of the foreground tree. The paint should do most of the work of blending here, between the light and the dark shades, giving you something of a grad around the edge of the tree. But if the blending needs any work, then dry your brush off and blend it a little like this. If your brush becomes too loaded with the darker paint, then just dry it off on tissue again and continue blending. Repeat this technique on the remaining areas, all the spaces that are not the main tree. Ultimately, this is what you'll end up with. Give the painting time to dry, or help it along with that hairdryer. Now you're going to paint the next layer of trees, so you'll need to make 2 slightly darker shades of paint. Again, it's worthwhile testing them on a spare piece of paper before you commit to the actual painting. Now this part's important. Pause here for a moment. Really examine the painting and figure out exactly which areas you're going to be painting. Spoiler alert, this is them. You'll notice that where branches go behind other branches, you'll have to figure out exactly which the foreground and the background trees are. Believe me, it's really easy to get complacent and end up painting over the wrong area. One of the reasons I absolutely love painting is it's a kind of meditative thing. But then I get carried away in a trippy dream world and end up painting over everything and really screwing it up. So it's important to concentrate, at least sometimes. If you're ready and you know which areas you're going to be painting, it's time to start. You're just doing exactly the same thing as the last layer, but on a smaller and more detailed scale in darker shades. Start with a flat wash and then add the darker grad around the edge of the area that you're painting. Now you can start to see the painting come together. And this is quite often the way with painting watercolors. Because you're layering up paint to get the final effect, the first few layers might not look totally mind-blowing, but as you progress through the painting, it'll look better and better. This is one of the reasons I'd encourage you to finish a painting, even if you make a mistake halfway through. You may even find that it's not that noticeable once you're finished. Once again, at this point, you'll want to take a pause and figure out exactly which areas you're going to paint. This is them. Mix the next shades of paint you're going to use and test them out on a spare piece of paper. Once you've got your colours ready, then paint the next layer using exactly the same technique, painting a flat wash and then using the darker shade to paint a grad around the edge of the trees. And now it's time for the final layer. And here's where you have to make a judgment call on where you want the darkest layer to end. Arguably, you should be painting all the gaps between the branches at the top of the painting. But that's not the effect I wanted to go for. I wanted to create a sense of depth by having the darkest elements of this picture at the centre. So these are the areas I've chosen to paint. So go ahead and mix the two darkest shades of paint you're going to use, and then fill these areas using the exact same technique you've been using so far. When I got to this point, I felt there was a bit of an imbalance to the painting, not enough of the darkest shade on the left-hand side. So I freestyled this little area here. It's totally up to you if you want to do that or not. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy up any little areas that need fixing. And we're done. I'm sure whatever colours you've chosen, you're going to do a killer job of this painting. And we'd be absolutely thrilled to see the results. Tag your painting on Instagram with #Chromatek and we'll check it out. If you have any questions or suggestions, then pop them in the comments below and we'll do our best to get back to you. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Social media validation is my whole life right now, and I'd probably die without it. As always, thanks for watching and sending you happy vibes from Tokyo.